Today we have a really special guest, all the way from Canada, Jeff Booth. Jeff has written the book, The Price of Tomorrow, and he is co-founder of Ego Death Capital, and he's had a profound influence on my Bitcoin journey. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, Paula.
On your website, you have a quote that I love. It says, starts with, watch your thoughts, they become your words, watch your words, they become your actions, and so on. Was there anybody that really influenced you in the personal development area? And what does that quote mean to you?
I would say almost everyone has influenced me in the personal development area, because I truly think you can learn from everybody. I do read a lot, but I don't think there's one person more than another. And the other thing that just I'm aware of as well is sometimes you don't know where a kernel of an idea comes from originally, and then you think it's yours later on, or somebody else reinforced it, and you assign the change to that new person because that's the thing that kind of cemented it, but it happened way before that. And so that's broadly why I just tend to look at, there's no one person, there's everyone who's always been around me influences that. But I see it so true across everything that we literally turn thoughts into reality. That's what we do. Everything around you today is made from somebody, in the construct of the world that you reference is from people creating that construct. So everything around us is that construct. So it's hard to not see us as key parts of that construct and all of our ideas. And if you just do a simple thought experiment on something you might not have known before, but now you can't unsee, you know you're part of it as well, and so we all are. And so how things move throughout time, how things emerge that we then see and we can't unsee, and society moves to that new truth, is out of us. It comes from us.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that I like to focus on what I want rather than what I don't want. And
right.
Before, when you wrote your book, you had incredible vision, and a lot of that stuff has come true. Where did that vision come from? Is that a little bit from the 10,000 hours?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. So the idea for that book started 10 years before that, and something that I couldn't unsee. And it was if technology and what we do is supposed to make us more productive by freeing our time, why did most people feel like they were on a mouse wheel going faster and faster and faster? Productivity should be flowing to us. And so on the investigation of that, so it was an insight. And then on the investigation of it, it was like, oh, this is so much worse than I thought from the existing system, but also understanding most people are measuring the world from that existing system, and they would be trapped within it. So that book was a book I didn't want to write, but you could see by essentially taking your mind out of and understanding how both would operate simultaneously, you could see what would happen within the existing system, and you could see what would happen in the world we should live in. And it was all really, people say visionary, but it was just using first principles to be able to understand what would happen. First principles and how humans make decisions, and how we're biased in those decisions we don't think we are. And so you could see kind of the cascading of events that would happen out of this structural change that needed to happen. Essentially, the paradox of a world we should live in versus the world we live and measure from. And Bitcoin was a resolve to the paradox. And it resolved that paradox because it imposed a new system that was bounded by energy, essentially a protocol bounded by energy, that imposed something we couldn't cheat. By imposing that, it moved the world from essentially theft and extraction, somebody wins while somebody else loses, to cooperation and abundance. But we're so early in that transition right now. Most people, I would say virtually, even most Bitcoiners, I don't think can see that. Most Bitcoiners are measuring Bitcoin price in US dollars. And by doing so, effectively what they're doing is saying, I'm going to trade this Bitcoin for this piece of paper sometime in the future so I can buy other things. And they don't realize that what's actually really happening, the depth of what we're talking about, the depth of the change that we're talking about, it's literally a humanity change at this depth that all prices fall to the marginal cost of production. All prices fall forever against Bitcoin. And as we move into that cooperation instead of extraction, and so the layers of the complexity, the layers people are going through in their journey to understand Bitcoin and what it actually is and what it means, because we've never had something like that before. They're having a hard time. They're essentially, most people are using this paradigm we live in today to measure the new paradigm, and they're getting stuck by that mismeasuring.
You brought up a lot of things that I want to talk further on, especially the price, because I do see people getting hung up on that, and I'm going to give you an example of myself in that. But before we get there, in your book, The Price of Tomorrow, I've heard you say it could be summed up in one sentence, that the natural state of the free market is deflationary. And I just want to say I had no idea what that was at first, and I see a lot of people understanding that maybe TVs should come down and phones, but not everything. And 2% to 3% inflation is normal, but not 30%. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's just the paradigm that people are living in. So they're measuring through the US dollar, and so they think some things are going up and some things are going down. They're measuring through a fiat. They're measuring through a piece of paper that has no cost to produce. They're just pressing a button that's stealing people's energy and time, and measured against the piece of paper. I coined this quote, kind of, the abundance and money creates scarcity everywhere else. Scarcity and money creates abundance. So abundance and money creating scarcity. If you can just print more pieces of paper at will with no cost to you by doing so, then all prices relative to the piece of paper go up. And so what you're now measuring inside that is what you're saying, well, computers are falling versus that. And digital things are falling, calculator app and other things are falling relative to the piece of paper, because Moore's law and the technology is moving so fast in some of these areas that it's even against that piece of paper, it's still falling. But the piece of paper then is houses and food prices, and physical things. It's pushing those things up. And so people are confused that all prices, energy prices energy prices are lower against something that's outside of that system. So Bitcoin, if you priced energy in Bitcoin, you would see energy prices falling at similar. You'd see house prices falling at similar. But you'd have to be able to see that, you'd have to have something outside of the system that wasn't inside measuring everything. And most people are inside that system measuring. And when they're converting Bitcoin to US dollar to measure, they're reinforcing they're inside the system. Effectively, they're screaming, hey, I'm still in the system too, and I want Bitcoin price to go up. Right? That's what they're doing, instead of understanding if it is a protocol chain, if it is a protocol bounded by energy, and if it stays decentralized and secure, it doesn't care about the piece of paper. It doesn't care if you want to price your house in the piece of paper. It doesn't care about all of the actions in building bigger and bigger government that want to take your individual rights and freedoms through the piece of paper. It doesn't care. It's pricing the free market falling forever. And all it has to do that is stay decentralized and secure. It's repricing that entire thing. But why this is, by the way, you mentioned a couple things even in the book and why they could predict. When you just said the natural state of the free market is deflation, and I haven't had anybody argue with me on that. But most people do exactly what you just did, drove the question. And even most people reading my book did the same thing. Yep, totally. And then go back to the other system or use the other system to measure. And this is the insight that almost changes you. Once you realize that that's true and it's incongruent with the system that we lived in, it's incongruent. There cannot be both. There can be both for a matter of time, while one extracts more and more energy and centralizes further. There can be, but these two systems are incompatible together. One frees us and takes us on an entirely uncharted journey to truth, hope, and abundance for 8 billion people, and one enslaves us.
For those of us that still earn in fiat and are not completely financially free, how do we transition more into this system when we're not completely paying in Bitcoin?
Yeah, so to think like that, so you're probably, in your audience is probably Western world, a whole bunch of people with an advantage. And that advantage today comes from extracting labor and materials from other people in the world that are at a disadvantage. So now ask what they would think if you told them about Bitcoin so they're living in absolute abject poverty and probably have a dictator extracting. And that dictator oftentimes is empowered by foreign interests that try to ensure access to oil or something. And that dictator is extracting from that population with help of IMF, with help of World Bank, with help of this entire structure. Essentially, you have modern day slavery for 7.5 billion people in the world to support the 500 million people that are on the winning side of that. So no wonder those people would get on boats to try to come to the countries that are stealing, right, and risk their families' lives. No wonder that would happen. So when you ask that question first from your lens, you have to look, what would they do? And what do? They want more US dollars. They want higher rate. They vote for more because they're in such pain and such fear. They can't see the world that I'm talking about right now. But they're so far away from that. They just want a job to pay their family, and they'll do anything to get that, to feed their family. So if they would do that, and now you extract where you are in that, or anyone is, and I'm telling myself, I need to make more fiat dollars till I get to a point that one day I can think in Bitcoin. You're actually making the system stronger. And so most people are making the system stronger, which has to steal more of their energy. And if you understand human nature, that's likely to continue until, some people can break free, and they can. So right now, this open protocol, permissionless protocol, anybody has a choice. They don't have to wait for the government to say yes. They don't have to wait for anybody to give them permission to front run truth, hope, and abundance in a new system and spend more time there. So what does that look like? It looks different to every single person. But what I just articulated is if you have more time to think and question your own assumptions because you can feed yourself and family and then you have more time to actually explore what this looks like. And if you're stuck into a paradigm that paradigm is fed essentially by the same people that are extracting from you so that you stay there, that fear holds you in that spot. Anyone can get out. Anyone in the world can get out because we have a new paradigm that's do they get out? And how far do they get out? And when you talk about the rabbit hole, kind of understanding the rabbit hole, how deep Bitcoin rabbit hole is, it's that understanding of how deep this goes. And I would say everybody in Bitcoin too, first, there's Bitcoin versus everybody else that's still stuck here. And then within Bitcoin, there's a whole different kind of myriad of different people making different choices in Bitcoin. Some people, most people, wanting it to go up in US dollar terms. And that will continue as you opened the question, or you open this interview with that statement. How does that change? It changes one person at a time. It changes with what we're doing right now. This person that's writing a book right now on the tie of this to consciousness that I've been helping a little bit. But she entered into that book by saying, I read your book 4 years ago and I watched every interview. And I knew, even though I knew nothing about economics, I knew what you were saying was true. beyond the hype, beyond anything else. So I just sat with it and sat with it and sat with it. And as I started to understand it, everything changed. And probably similar to what you're going through, similar to what I went through, similar to that's a one-to-one person that's gonna transition across time.
Well, that's such a true statement for me. I often say, when you hear the truth, you know it. And when I hear you speak, I know you're speaking the truth. And I just want to say I appreciate how you do it in such a kind way. I can hear it's the truth. I haven't understood everything. I'm still obviously thinking in fiat a little bit, but I know it's the truth, and that's why I'm going to keep going down that rabbit hole. I'm originally from Zimbabwe. My family lived there. I go back. Zimbabwe uses the US dollar on one side and the Zimbabwe dollar on the other side,
Yep.
and there is a huge difference. I know you've spent some time in Africa, and I have a big place in my heart for those Zimbabweans. I spoke to one this week, and they are starting to use Bitcoin. And she particularly didn't want to be part of the banking system because she saw her mother getting up at 3 a.m. to get into the lines, and that's what it is for them. And I personally don't want to be part of this system that exploits those type of people.
Yeah.
So as far as just a little more example of how does our system exploit them exactly, it's not clear. It's, they use our dollar, but the people at the top are doing very well.
Yeah, but that would be natural, right? So if the U.S. dollar global trade has to equal zero, by the way, the trade balance has to be zero. So there has to be sellers and there has to be buyers. And with the U.S. dollar as the functional reserve currency of the world, it means the U.S. dollar and their trading partners, say Japan, Euro, and everything else, are the buyers, and the rest of the countries are the sellers. And as soon as their prices rise, then that product has to move somewhere else where it's cheaper. And what ends up happening is, because the debt is denominated in US dollars, instead of that happening, they revalue the debt down. They do currency intervention, the currency fails, and then all of the prices get cheaper for the people in the US from that country. And you could just say, use a free market example, cobalt today, if we were moving to batteries, then the Democratic Republic of Congo should be a very wealthy nation because it has 70% of the cobalt used for those batteries. Instead, their currency gets revalued every 5 years. So we can extract that cobalt for almost nothing because the labor and the raw materials are extracted from. So you use essentially a currency system, a monetary system, to enshrine modern-day slavery through that system. And there is no out. By the way, it's actually also now to a point that's bad for the U.S. because all of the critical infrastructure, even, and I'm using the world most people are measuring in now, the critical infrastructure for the war machine, industrial military capacity, is now offshored into all of these regions that are becoming more and more unstable, because there's no way to move that critical infrastructure to the U.S. because the free market is too expensive to put the labor and materials there. So through this monetary system, now you're getting it reaching end of term where who's my geopolitical ally? They're changing fast because there's competitors trying to change monetary systems. So it's what we're entering into is a time of greater and greater uncertainty and volatility. And things can change really quickly because the system is so unstable. And the entire system is built on extraction of through a monetary system. But that's why it's so easy to get confused inside that system when measuring the new system, because the new system has none of that. It just looks like a cooperative system globally.
So what does a deflationary system on the Bitcoin standard look like?
It looks like every human on the planet gets richer every year, period. A free market is deflation. And if you just think through that, why we're using Riverside right now, is it offers more value for very low costs than things that came before it. So now a new podcaster like yourself can touch millions of people Whereas 10 or 20 years ago, you would have to have a marketing budget, like an extraordinary marketing budget, to be able to have even a chance to do that. And you'd have to fly people to you, and the cost would be outrageous. So you couldn't contribute your knowledge in 20 years ago the same way you can now. And so your contribution of this on Riverside touches other people, and the output of that is prices fall. If all things lived in that world today, you'd probably have prices falling. This is impossible because you can't measure an unknown. So I'm just forecasting or trying to put a guesstimate to what this is. So if you removed the misallocated capital, all of the nonsense that's spent against, and it was all free market driven like we're talking about, and what that means is all the monopolies would go away, and extracting more and more of your time. If in a free market, a monopoly can't exist, because at least for a long time, because if the monopoly has pricing power, that creates staggering other entrepreneurs trying to innovate against that monopoly to give more value. So the output of that is prices keep falling. In that world today, you'd probably have 5% deflation, meaning every single person on the planet would get richer by 5%, even if they did nothing. And then the following year, instead of being 5%, it would probably move to 7.5% or 8%. And they would get richer by 8% that year by doing nothing. And then the following year, it might be 15%. And they get richer by 15% by doing nothing. Now, the people that wanted to work against that and create more value, they could create more value and they could get wealthier faster. But you think about the output of that. Their money now goes way further, and now they're investing in things that are going way further. And the entire thing is a faster and faster feedback loop to what I talk about all the time: truth, hope, and abundance. And it's cooperative in nature, because everybody in that feedback loop is winning for everyone else.
I want to tell on myself now. I sold a condo that I owned for various reasons. One, because the fees are getting too high, and another to put into Bitcoin. And I did put most of it into self-custody Bitcoin, but I did buy some ECFs and I did buy some AI stocks. And the reason I did that is because I one day want to buy a house, and I cannot sell my self-custody, but I know I can sell those other things. But the more I listen to you, the more I think I should have just put it into Bitcoin. I do need that money one day to buy a house. How do you negotiate with that in the short term? And it is making the system stronger.
Yeah, so I don't assign or I don't judge anybody for doing the thing that they want to do. And if somebody wants to use all their Bitcoin, Troy Cross, a good friend of mine, tells a story and I love this story. He wanted alpaca socks. And I think the alpaca socks were 20 Bitcoin per socks. And he bought 5 or 6 sets of alpaca socks. This going back a long time ago, is because he wanted to use Bitcoin. Now, those are really expensive socks now, like $5 million socks, and it's a great story. Same as the pizza story, same as somebody selling a bunch of Bitcoin for a house. So this transition is all determined by whenever you think that you want whatever you want. And you should be able to do whatever you want when you want with the transition. So because sometimes it's not a financial decision, it's for your family decision, or whatever that decision is, why you spend in the first place, and you should be able to make it for whatever you want. But now if you take a look at your house as an example, as we know inside the manipulated system, that because money loses value and houses lose money less fast, it's moved, instead of being a currency, a house is now a store of value. So if it acts as a store of value and nobody can find their way out of manipulated money, so everybody races into the store of value, the house loses what it used to be, a utility to raise your family, and it becomes a store of value. Now, what that means is, if you just said how big these markets are, that means that store of value premium on a house is a staggering staggering premium. And we're really early in Bitcoin adoption. Like even this conversation is going to blow people's brains that aren't as deep. So we're really early in Bitcoin adoption. And so what that means is if you wanted to trade your Bitcoin for, like if the house I'm sitting in, if I traded my Bitcoin 4 years ago, it would have cost 300 Bitcoin to buy this house. And this year, it cost 22 Bitcoin to buy this house. Even though in fiat, the house has gone up in value, it costs 22 now. And in 4 years, this house will probably cost 2 Bitcoin. Now, at any time, and by the way, that's also why this constantly distributes too. Because if you held a whole bunch of Bitcoin and you want to buy other things and you want to utilize this, you're going to be constantly spending above your adding value to the free market and distributing your Bitcoins. And so unlike the existing financial system, which concentrates wealth and concentrates monopolies and concentrates power in very few, this system constantly distributes that to everyone. And every single person has that choice of when they want to spend more than they consume, or spend more than they provide value of.
So I hear what you're saying. Anything that I trade my Bitcoin for today is probably going to be a lot more it'll be a lot less in the future.
But then the other thing is, who cares, right? I spend my Bitcoin every day. I spend on Zaps and Nostr. I spend it on, if somebody will take Bitcoin, then I will make a point to use that service or product. So I try to spend Bitcoin every day, knowing full well that it's going to be more valuable in the future, because I'm just putting my time and energy kind of where I want the world to go. Because if there's more people doing that, that means more vendors will take it, because there's a block of people that will only use those vendors, and that'll drive the acceleration of the ecosystem faster.
Yeah, that was actually one of my questions, how you live more in the Bitcoin way. And just with that example, do you then put your, say, Canadian dollars back into Bitcoin? Do you have you're always replacing.
So I do, and then I'll just buy more to replace. So I think as much as I can now in Canada, it's still not easy to spend Bitcoin everywhere. So to say I'm 100% Bitcoin, in some places you could be in some of these circular economies. It's hard to do that completely here, but I have an intention to do it, and I try to where I can. And when I'm traveling in a lot of these places, I absolutely use it as a primary. And probably more so, I think in those terms. And if you wanted in thinking like this is a light switch for one day I'm in this system and then the next day I'm going to move to the other system, I wouldn't think about that if you're listening to this podcast, don't think you have to do that. Just take steps. Right? If you're not running a node right now, learn to run a node. If you're not on Nostr, go on Nostr and start to communicate and see what it looks like, decentralized, secure, and true freedom technology. If you're wanting to meet other people that are doing that, go to some meetups. You'll see an explosion of opportunity, and you meet really, really great people from all over the world doing the same thing, and it'll create opportunities. And then you're going to see different opportunities from spending more time there that you couldn't have seen before you were spending the time there. So what we're doing with Ego Death is similar, right? I knew that a bunch of this had to happen, and I wanted to put my my time to be aligned with helping it happen. What would be one of the best things I could do is help entrepreneurs create the success that they wanted to create on top of it, because it's something I had a lot of pattern recognition for. So I thought, by creating a venture capital company that understood Bitcoin really at this level, and then being able to utilize what I'm really good at to help other entrepreneurs create their dreams, I could use my skills to help accelerate this ecosystem.
And how has that changed your life, Jeff, by living in this new system?
it's been remarkable. In fact, so you heard me at Bitcoin Atlantis talking about how I was a hypocrite, and I was a hypocrite talking about Bitcoin, while operating in fiat and investing in fiat and being on a whole bunch of boards in fiat, and not just a hypocrite that was really popular. And people talked about, and so that was a hard thing to go through, to realize the same thing I'm trying to tell other people that I saw in myself by measuring against this other world, and talking about this one that I wanted to happen, where I wasn't aligned. My words and actions weren't aligned with the world that I said I wanted to happen. They were aligned to make more money. Even though I knew this deeper, and so that's why what I kind of go deep onto this, because seeing that in myself, understanding that in myself, was like a slap across the face, and I had to change that. So that was the start of ego death. That was the idea, kind of in the impetus behind ego death, moving my time and energy to the space I wanted to see thrive, where I wanted to see the world I wanted to see for my kids. And it's been remarkable. I wish more people could see what I see now by making that switch in my own time. It just the abundance. It just everywhere. The people I meet, the entrepreneurs I get to spend time with, the opportunities. It's just incredible just by making that switch.
So what I'm hearing is, for people who are still working in the fiat world, and for me, I'm a realtor in Miami, and I'm kind of tired of it. And so I'm spending my time doing this podcast, and partly because of what Bitcoin has allowed me to do. But I know not everybody's in the position to move over fully yet, and I'm getting there. But so just doing it at the level that each person can, and slowly moving over in certain ways, paying where you can, learning more.
That's it. And not judging anybody else by where they are. This is a journey. Everybody's going to find it in their own time and what this looks like. So what do you want to do? If you're spending 2% of your time and you really love it, spend 4% of your time. Find a way to just increase it a bit. Then spend 8% of your time. Then spend 16% of your time. And I'll bet you every step along that way, and spending more of your time, it'll be like a mirror reflecting that time back at you. It'll because it's on the honest system. And so as you see and spend more time there, you start to see it everywhere, and you start to want to spend more time in there. But this isn't something you should feel like, I have to do tomorrow, light switch, and I'm going to move it has to be at your pace. And so for your own, what you're doing right now is a really good example. Right? I'm a realtor, that's where I make my income, but I'm going to move some of my time. I'm going to create this separate kind of side hustle, right? I don't even need to get paid for, but I'm going to do it for me, my learning, and for other people who start to see this. And then from that, you're going to learn a whole bunch of other things, see other things, and you're going to potentially make the next step and the next step. So it's just a really great way, or this is one really great way. Others are going to meetups and just start spending more time in it.
And Jeff, another thing you said is you're on Nostr more. You used to be more on X, Twitter. And I do notice that you do not shout and argue and have those conversations with people, whereas a lot of people do. That's just part of you living in the better world.
Yeah, there's that's a nuance, and is a big question, right? And so why do you get mad or anything when somebody says something bad about you? Just for social media, but then we can extend it to social media. When somebody says something about you, what's driving your reaction?
I want to be liked.
Yeah, probably, or they said something that your construct of who you are, they pierced. And so it could be important information that you need to take in, that you did something wrong, right, to learn. It could be, but it could be just them describing the world that they're just yelling at you for something that's totally in them. But either way in that, the question is, why does it hurt you? Why do you react? And you react, most people react because it says something about their ego but if you just took it as it's just data, it's just, and if you're walking down the street and a crazy person was screaming at you, would that hurt you? Right? And there's lots of crazy people online, right? Or lots of people that are acting like that online, and people are reflecting it back, yelling at them back, and it's just a total colossal waste of energy. And so I try to think of it as, is this insight something that I need to learn from? And if it's constantly happening and people are saying, haha, it's me, it's not them, they're right, it's me, and I need to take something, or do I just ignore it? Right? Is it not something it's not saying anything about me? It's saying something of who they are, and they're trying to gain credibility or gain something by yelling at somebody else or trying to. Why is it about you? I guess what it is. Those words can't hurt you unless you allow them to hurt. They're only words unless you allow them to hurt you.
And also wanting to be right, which is also about the ego. I noticed that.
Yeah, and again, it's what it's doing typically is it's piercing your ego, and it's saying you don't matter, and you come back with, no, I matter, I'm right. I like, here, I'll show you, and you just turn into this giant mushroom cloud of stuff. You see it happening all the time on social media, and but it happens personally too, right? It happens without social media, just it's not amplified as much. So I kind of asked myself that question to if it's triggering me, why is it triggering me?
Jeff, I want to just go back to the fiat world. I have a question. I've always had this question, and I know what you've said about it, but I'd like to hear it again. Why are all altcoins going to zero? Yeah,
and I think for that article I wrote, Finding Signal in a Noisy World, describes it in a better way than I can I would like it just really quickly. But there's something called the blockchain trilemma, that decentralization, security, and scalability, and you choose two of three. So Bitcoin's solved decentralization and security, and still today, if you measure it by anything, by mining, hash power, energy backing the network, all of those rationale, you can see that it's the only thing that's decentralized and secure, and it's getting more and more decentralized and secure every year. But it had a problem that it couldn't scale. So imagine you don't have to imagine very hard, right? You're living in a world measuring Bitcoin, and from the world that you're measuring from, the fiat instrument, and Bitcoin from that looks like it's going crazy in price, when it's really, we're just repricing the entire world into Bitcoin. But you can't do anything on it. By the way, that is its utility. The utility is it captures the entire monetary value, monetary premium of all the financialization of the world and restores it to humanity. So when people say it has no utility, you kind of, interesting. So it only has the biggest utility ever seen to anything, and people are saying it has no utility. But if you actually saw it that way, and it was actually truly outside of the system, and repricing the world, then inside that environment, to a whole bunch of people that were gambling, right, or saying I'm going to make more U.S. dollars, it would look like I need to create a new Bitcoin because I can't change Bitcoin. So I'm going to create scalability, and I'm going to sacrifice either decentralization or security to do it. And all of those other coins sacrifice either decentralization or security to achieve scalability, and then the entire thing fails in time, because why would you use a centralized blockchain? Because really what you're saying there is, I'm going to use an expensive database that I control. And then and how could there be DeFi on top of a centralized that's in an expensive blockchain? So So just on the basis of it, the other ones can't work on the basis of what I just described. Now the article goes way deeper than that, and it's important to do that, to look at that or review that article. But you could see even well-intentioned people on top of that thinking they could bring more utility to something that had to stay decentralized and secure. Remember, humans have never seen a money that didn't get co-opted. So now you have to imagine the type of pressure that would come after Bitcoin to try to co-opt it. So decentralization and security are critical. And then by acting as a protocol, other things get built on top of the protocol. So other functionality emerges in time on top of the protocol.
So this might not happen right away, but in the future, that's where it's going. Well, thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate your time today. Where can people find you?
I always say this on podcasts because there's too many scammers out there, but I'm pretty much only on Nostr now. So if you so I'm not on X anymore. There's a Instagram profile that is verified. That's not me. That's trying to scam people. If you're ever curious about where to find, just book my website, jeffbooth.ca, and I constantly list anything. If I join a new social media or something, I'll list it there. But if it's not on the website, it's not me.
Thank you, Jeff.
You betcha. Thank you.